today's video, I would like to talk about how I ended up with a Fiat 126P myself. Enjoy this video. To go back to the year 1990. It was the summer of that year, and my uncle came from Poland down to Austria in his own Fiat 126P to pick us up to spend the summer vacation on the Polish Sea. It was by somewhat of a coincidence that we ended up before a fence, and apparently I said to my uncle that he should jump over the fence like Kid from the series of Knight Rider. At this time of the year, or in 1990, I was just not quite 5 years old, so I don't remember this from my own memory, but obviously my parents told me this history, which is rather funny. Back then I was a huge fan of the TV series, and even nowadays if there's an episode on, I like to watch it because it's always been a great fun, and to this day I'm still a fan of the series. This incident must have been so deep in my subconscious that even 20 years later I ended up with my own Fiat 126P. I have to admit, I never planned on buying a Fiat 126P or an old-timer for that matter, but obviously fate wanted it differently for me, so that's how I ended up with my own Fiat. I started looking for it maybe a few weeks prior to actually buying it, and I was looking for affordable offers, and I found this one, which was in Höxter. That's in Germany. It's around 700 to 750 kilometers away from Linz, so basically quite far away. However, my father agreed to driving there and take a look of this car. So we contacted the guy who sold the car, who was selling the car, and agreed upon a date. So on a Saturday morning we hopped into the car and drove over. A couple of hours later in the afternoon we arrived there, took a look of the car. It seemed technically very fine. There was no rust. Unfortunately, back then Fiats had some kind of a reputation that the cars are rusting pretty badly. However, this turned out to be not true for this car, which was very great. Obviously we took it for a test drive. Again, I have to admit, back then I had my driver's license for just over a year, so I was afraid to drive different cars other than my own. So I asked my father to do the test drive. So I took it out for a little spin around Höxter and its nearby streets, and the car was functioning very well. There were no issues with the engine. It started immediately, so there were basically no concerns about buying this car. So back at the seller's house we signed the contract, and unfortunately we didn't have the possibility to take the car with us on this date, so we arranged the transport a few weeks later. It was then on December 10th, 2010 that the car was delivered to me. Not exactly to my doorstep, but just to the next town of Linz, which was just a 10 minutes drive, so that's quite okay. Unfortunately, as usual in December, it was snowing here in Linz and the surrounding areas, and again I was afraid of driving the car myself home, so I asked my father once more, and he gladly agreed to doing that, which for him was somewhat of a time jump back into his own youth. Obviously this car was driven in Poland as the Volkswagen in Germany, so it was a very nice experience for him as well. So the car ended up in my garage, and I was now an owner of a Fiat 126P myself. That is basically the history how I ended up with this particular car. Obviously it looked a little bit different back then. It had a few changes done in the past, and now I would like to talk about how I registered this car in Austria. In order to register an imported car here in Austria, there has to be a primary technical inspection of the car. However, this inspection is not being done in a car shop. It has to be done by the government itself. Luckily, there is a subsidiary here in Linz, which is quite near my home, so that wasn't an issue. So I drove there. They performed the inspection, and in the end, if the car is okay, you get the green light for registering the car and driving it around. Unfortunately, this didn't work out the first time. The first time I made an appointment and drove there, it was maybe 200 meters before the check that the car died on me and wouldn't restart. It turned out that the fuel pump had some kind of an error or fault or whatever, and therefore I wasn't able to perform the inspection on that particular appointment. Obviously, the car had run over 75,000 kilometers at a time, so a faulty fuel pump is okay. It's frustrating for the owner of a car the first thing to do is to repair something, but that's quite okay. So as the car is very, very basic, I myself was even able to repair the fuel pump and made a second appointment, and on the second try everything worked out pretty fine. The first appointment was in January of 2011, and the second one was in April of that year. So I've managed to register the car on April 2011, and since then I've been driving this car. Obviously, it was from the beginning that I have been driving this car only on very nice days, and so therefore in the past 10 years I have only accumulated maybe 8 to 10,000 kilometers. In comparison with my green Fiat 126P that I also own, I've driven it in the last 5 years probably the same amount, which is around 10,000 kilometers now. That is basically the way to register a car here in Austria if you buy it outside from Austria. So you have to make a technical inspection by the government, and then you're allowed to register the car for driving. In order to bring this video to a close, I would like to shortly mention the upcoming projects. I have already mentioned that the car currently doesn't have its original engine installed. This is an ongoing project. I have already contacted one local mechanic whom I will be speaking to in greater detail shortly. Unfortunately, he was ill the past week, so I wasn't able to do that. However, obviously I will be contacting other mechanics as well locally. And another thought that I already had was to have the car transported back to Poland to the same mechanic who took out the engine in 2018. He's quite familiar with the car, so hopefully he will agree to put back the engine and into the car. And as a big thanks to the car, I would plan on driving it back from Poland. I obviously did a trip last year with my green Fiat 126P back from Poland to Austria. It took 10 hours, which is very, very nice for this kind of car, and there were no problems, no issues whatsoever. So that would be my gift to the car for the end of the summer. For 2021, I have planned to change up the interior. Obviously, it's coming to the years, and it doesn't look as nice as it could. So there's some changes coming. I'm thinking about going with Alcantara with some orange stitching to match the car. But there's still a lot of time until 2021, so I can think about it in greater detail. And that's the upcoming plans for this car. I certainly hope you liked this video. If you did, leave your like, obviously, hit that comments or hit that like button, write your comments down below. And if you didn't like this video, please just don't hit the thumbs down button. Maybe leave a comment down below so I can know what you didn't like, so I can make my videos better in the future. Share this video with your friends, family, everyone who is into old-timers, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye bye.
Night Rider, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist. Michael Knight, a young loner on a crusade to champion the cause of the innocent, the helpless, the powerless, in a world of criminals who operate above the law.